if I'm wrong, Dan, but a lot of these are very senior water rights, pre-14 and riparian for a block of, the water rights. So there would be relative certainty there that these would be, could be carved out with regard to some larger curtailments. But again, that's something we would have to look into, and this speaks to the overarching question here appears to be, is there trust with what the water board would do with this if we have the emergency reg? We're not going to take this new tool and go out and be crazy and use it and now say, well, now we can and therefore we will. There are off-ramps for every element of the curtailment. If we have information that suggests temperatures are not right, things are not right, we don't just blindly require basefall flows through June. Information appears to suggest now that that would not be a wise thing to do, and therefore we would not be doing it.
But how do you give that assurance based on the plain reading of this to all of these water rights? I'm just putting myself in the shoes of somebody there, and from a public policy standpoint, how do we give that assurance to people that that's not what we're trying to do?
And I hear that, and I hear great thoughtfulness coming from those in the watershed that I think are closer to it and know it better than we can. And yet, in the event that we're not able to meet certain flows, we'll need quickly these tools to provide some assurance. We've looked at a lot of extremes. We keep hearing about the extremes, but we seem to rather be looking at the margins and looking at this ultimately, is this going to be a reasonable thing for us to do when we're on the cusp of changing conditions? And I'm sorry to say there's no great certainty right now to say, well, no, June 12th it'll stop, therefore it's off. We simply don't know. We don't have all the information. So, and I know it's an awkward response to say, trust that we will use this, judiciously and reasonably. But that's the best that we have in the light of all of the information and the need to respond quickly in the event that things don't line up well. And this is also why we might find, looking at all of the curtailments, again, we have to, this is all, I hear the comments, it's happened quickly internally as well. Perhaps we shouldn't be conceding that, but we will need time to look at these agreements and see how it folds in with everything else that's going on in the basin, so we don't give the incorrect answer, the definitive answer here that say, don't worry. Is we'll have to look and see how all of that works together and broadcast that information out if we adopt after the fact, to give people as much opportunity as possible. But it's ultimately going to be, what's going to be reasonable to do in light of all the information.
Did you have a question? On curtailments, I'm not sure I don't understand. You're talking about in the event that you utilize like a term 91 or 96, but what about just regular curtailments? But for this regulation, wouldn't these watersheds be subject to curtailment?
Well, if, for example, just a normal curtailment, if we curtail the entire Delta watershed, this is within the Delta watershed, so post-14 appropriators would be affected just like everyone else in the watershed if it dug down to that level, that priority of right. Okay.
So the way I view this, and I'm surprised that nobody brought this up today, I mean, I really think that this waste and unreasonable use is sort of a back door to reconfiguring the priority of water rights, because in effect, if you look at that, the curtailment charts that we keep seeing, the supply and demand curve, the most senior would be fish flows. They'd be more senior than riparian. It would just, fish flows, riparian, 1914, et cetera. So it would be another layer that would go on top of the existing curtailment charts that you would otherwise have for those watersheds.
Which correct, and I think one of the comments that we heard, because we're basically putting that on the bottom, because absent that, there would be only a curtailment to protect senior water rights, and then there would be no protection. But I think I heard it argued today that, well, you really need to kind of look at everything, look at all the water use in the basin and see, is there some, if you're going to do this, look at some mix and match. And I think, well, two answers to that. That would take quite a bit of time, and I think the overarching determination here is that since we are putting these listed species at risk, in a very critically dry year, that they do need that base protection, and again, only to the extent that it is during a time when it can be effective.
Well, yeah, that's an argument that could be made in favor of it, but I'm saying the way I look at it, it's restructuring the water rights. And so, Member Dodick, I appreciate that you want more time on this, and I think that we all need that, myself included. But I just feel like, as a matter of, for transparency, I'd like to share with you all what my thoughts are. So I don't want to just talk to staff and kind of negotiate that way. I'd like to be able to raise some of the concerns that I have and maybe some suggestions.
Yeah, let me just, I have a little bit of concern both about time and transparency purposes. And one suggestion I was going to throw out for the board to consider is you do have another agenda item tomorrow. You do, under the Open Meeting Act, have the ability to continue this item and to reorient your calendar. There is a lot of overlap between the participants in this proceeding. I recognize there are some folks who come down from Tehama County who may not have been planning on at least participating in item 13, the Delta-wide curtailments. But there would be an opportunity for the board to digest everything it's heard today, staff also to digest, and staff to meet internally in the morning. And then tomorrow morning when the board resumes, it could start with this item. If there's any direction, I know Vice Chair Spivey Weber has encouraged the board to provide direction to staff before the staff go back to work this evening. But we have an opportunity tomorrow morning for the board members who've cogitated on what they've heard, the additional material that Mr. O'Loughlin has indicated he's going to submit. You'd have an opportunity to review that. And then you could provide some direction tomorrow morning to staff based on that. The staff who aren't involved in item 13 would then have an opportunity to, and you all as board members would first be able to exchange amongst yourself the concerns you have and provide collective direction to staff. Those staff could then potentially work on it while the item 13 proceeds, and then you could resume with item 12 at the conclusion of the workshop on item 13. Just another path to give time, additional options for staff and the board to work through in the 16, 17 hours that we have before us.
And if I could just add one other scheduling issue. We had for the panel tomorrow from the Department of Water Resources and NOAA Fisheries, they were only available until about 10 o'clock, so it would be important then to start the item 13 at 9, just so we could get through that, rather than taking this up first thing. So it would be another reason to not take this up first.
Yeah, I mean, certainly whatever anybody wants to do, I really want to digest what I've heard, but I also do want to ask staff some questions, not here. I have others I could ask here, but there are some I want to understand before I opine on this, because there are just so many thoughts. I want to be able to collect my thoughts and distill them down to what is really most important based on the mass of things we heard today. And there are, some of the things I might want could be solved by amendments to the document, but other things might not be. And I just feel it's significantly important that I also want to sleep on it. But I would like to talk to people before you go home or by phone tonight, not wait till we come back into open session tomorrow so that I can then distill my thoughts.
What time would be reasonable for those board members who would like to get have a conversation prior to the board meeting? Is for Felicia, for Tam? Is that are you recommending that we not do that at all?
Well, if they're specific, just from a transparency
Right.
perspective, I think given the timeline, it's a lot better to get as much of it, on the public record as possible. Certainly if there are items that board members want to be pointed to in the staff report or to help frame their questions, it's appropriate under the Open Meeting Act for individual board members to ask the staff those questions outside of the public meeting. But again, given the timelines that this is under, I would encourage as much of it to occur on the public open meeting as possible.
Okay.
Okay.
It's now or tomorrow in open session.
Yeah, but I think
Either place, yes.
I'll just go ahead and jump in because I don't.
A lot more of the legal underpinning.
Yeah, I don't.
Hasn't it?
I could go on and on forever here. I am really not comfortable with this approach at all. I think that there's a lot of other ways that it could have been done, but at the same time, we are in an extreme situation, and I've talked with staff about this. I want to be a team player. I want to, work together with staff and with the board, with all the stakeholders, and, where there's a problem, we need to address it. I think that we should have utilized other tools, namely the agreements. But in light of the fact that, we're here now, time is of the essence, I will just give my opinion. I don't think it's going to change overnight, although, I'm very open to other views, but I've been kind of noodling on this for a while here. I don't think we have an emergency that's in existence on two of the creeks. And so I can't justify supporting an emergency regulation when it doesn't appear that there's an actual emergency. On Deer Creek, that's, a different situation. And so I'm just thinking of a tool that we used to use at the Air Resources Board. We used this a number of times where we were trying to encourage action. I mean, it just seems to me if we had a little more time and if we could do a little more coaxing, we could probably get an agreement on deer as well. It sounds like there's, the makings of an agreement. And so I talked with Mr. Loeffler about this. I would suggest, because I think something that Mr. Grover said earlier about, wanting to have basically like a backstop, it sort of seems like the groundwater situation. We're looking for a way to really encourage action at the local level, encourage these agreements. And so what we did a couple of times at the Air Resources Board was adopt a reg and then hold it, not advance it to OAL. And that would, in effect, serve as a backstop. So I know that there were, some comments made about what if these agreements fall apart. It just seems to me that I haven't heard of any evidence that people are going to enter into the agreement and then not do it. But at the same time, we need to sort of be ready to be on the spot. And so that would be my recommendation, to utilize a tool along those lines. And then I also, but I can talk with staff about this. I have a whole list of things that I think, it probably things could be cleaned up a little bit. If an agreement comes in, I think that we have a responsibility that we should respond within, a very short amount of time. Encourage folks to enter into the agreement. We need to review and act quickly. Somebody mentioned an appeal. I don't know if we need to go, what kind of detail, but I think we need a little more process. And so I have a list of things along those lines that I can talk with staff about.
I think that we will not, well, it's my understanding we will not finish this item today. We will reconvene tomorrow. It does sound like we do need to reconvene. We need to bring this item up after we've had some presentations by staff on item number 12. Is it 12? 13, I'm sorry. Oh, gosh. That's not very lucky, is it? 13.
Only if you're a Templar.
So, so we will carry this item over until tomorrow. We will, the Chair Marcus will get to take over.
Take my chair back.
Take her chair back, and we will take this item up after we have heard from Fish and Wildlife. And who else did you say was coming?
I think the conflict was with NOAA fisheries staff and Department of Water Resources.
We want to definitely make sure that they have an opportunity to present on 13, and then we'll get back to this. Is that all right?
Yeah, and overnight, I would like people to think about ways to write it so it's not so open-ended along the lines. I mean, just think about verbiage, because I just worry about the trust us piece. There's an element of discretion that actually is helpful in an emergency, but there's, I can see why people worry about the truck size discretion.
Thank you. Then we are what's the term? We are adjourning for the evening. We will reconvene in the morning at 9 o'clock.
And thank you all, that was very helpful. And thank you.
Hit send. Just to you can copy me as well. Okay. Whichever one of us gets it first, I'm sure it's sorted out.
Michael, any ideas on making this more explicit?
In terms of, are we shut down, Janine?